Ever looked at a piece of needlework and thought it looked like a tiny, perfect mosaic of X's? That's cross-stitch. Then you see another piece that flows like a painting, with swooping lines and textured fills, and you wonder if it's even the same craft. It isn't. While both use a needle and thread to decorate fabric, thinking of them as the same is like confusing pixels with paint strokes. One is a game of precision and grids, the other a world of freeform artistry. Let me explain the real differences, because understanding them is the key to choosing your next project, mastering the craft you love, and appreciating the skill behind every single stitch. Core technique. Here's the fundamental split. Cross-stitch is a specific type of counted thread embroidery, while embroidery is the broad, overarching category of art. Think of it like this. A square is a rectangle, but not all rectangles are squares. Cross-stitch almost exclusively uses one stitch, the cross-stitch, to create a picture. You make one diagonal slash, then cross it with another to form an X. That's the building block for everything. Embroidery, on the other hand, is a vast library of stitches. You have the satin stitch for smooth fills, the back stitch for crisp outlines, French knots for texture, the chain stitch for bold lines, and hundreds more. It's a vocabulary, and the artist chooses which words to use. Cross-stitch gives you a single, perfect letter to build with. Embroidery gives you the entire alphabet. Fabric and canvas. The technique you use directly dictates the fabric you need. Because cross-stitch is all about counting, you need a fabric with a built-in grid. The most common is Aida cloth, which is woven with obvious holes that make it easy to create uniform, evenly spaced stitches. You can also use even weave fabrics like linen, where the threads are consistent, but the grid is less pronounced. The bottom line is, if you can't count it, you can't cross-stitch on it easily. Embroidery is far more forgiving. You can stitch on almost anything you can get a needle through: cotton, denim, felt, silk, even leather. The design is usually transferred directly onto the fabric surface, so you aren't bound by a grid. This freedom opens up a huge range of applications, from decorating a jean jacket to embellishing a silk pillowcase. Needles and threads. Your choice of needle follows the same logic. For cross-stitch, you'll use a tapestry needle. These have a blunt tip and a large eye. The blunt tip is crucial because you're not piercing the fabric. You're guiding the thread through the existing holes in the Aida or even weave grid. A sharp needle would just split the fabric threads and mess up your count. Embroidery, however, demands a sharp needle. Since you're creating your own holes as you go, you need a point that can smoothly pierce the fabric. The type and size of the sharp needle will vary depending on the fabric's thickness and the thread you're using. Speaking of thread, cross-stitch almost always uses 6-strand cotton floss, where you separate the strands, usually using 2 at a time, to control the thickness of your stitches. Embroidery uses that too, but also embraces pearl cotton, silk, wool, and metallic threads to create different sheens and textures. Design and appearance. This is where you see the pixels versus paint difference most clearly. Cross-stitch designs are created on a chart where each colored square represents a single X stitch. The final result has a distinct pixelated look. It's perfect for geometric patterns, retro designs, and detailed images where every block of color is precisely placed. It has a clean, graphic quality. Embroidery, by contrast, is painterly. Because you can use flowing lines, blend colors with different stitches, and fill shapes organically, the final piece can look like a drawing or painting made with thread. It's ideal for capturing the curve of a flower petal, the texture of an animal's fur, or the elegant script of a monogram. Difficulty and learning curve. So, which one is easier to start? Most people find cross-stitch more beginner-friendly. The learning curve is gentle because you only need to master one basic stitch and the process of following a chart. If you can count, you can cross-stitch. The challenge comes later, with managing dozens of colors, working on large-scale projects, and keeping the back of your work tidy. Embroidery has a slightly steeper initial curve because you need to learn a handful of different stitches to create a dynamic design. A simple backstitch is easy, but a perfect satin stitch or a non-lumpy French knot takes practice. However, once you have a small vocabulary of stitches, the creative possibilities open up much faster than in cross-stitch. Speed and workflow. People always ask which one is faster, and the answer is, it depends. A small, simple embroidery design with just a few outline stitches can be finished in an hour or two, but a large, complex piece filled with dense satin stitches could take weeks. Cross-stitch is more predictable. A project's duration is a direct function of its size and the number of stitches. Creating a single cross-stitch technically takes 2 movements, while a simple running stitch in embroidery takes 1. So for pure line work, embroidery is faster. But because cross-stitch is so methodical and repetitive, many people find they can get into a rhythm and work quite quickly on filling in large blocks of color, whereas the varied nature of embroidery can require more stopping and starting to switch techniques. Patterning and transfer. Here's a major workflow difference. Cross-stitch patterns are essentially maps. You get a chart with symbols, a key that tells you which thread color corresponds to each symbol, and you just start stitching from the center or a corner. There's no need to draw anything on the fabric itself. Embroidery usually requires you to transfer a design onto the fabric before you begin. You might trace it using a light source, use special transfer paper, or draw it on with a water-soluble pen. This extra step is critical for guiding your stitches, especially for complex shapes and lines. The trade-off is that once the pattern is transferred, you have more creative freedom to interpret it, whereas cross-stitch demands you follow the chart exactly. Flexibility and corrections. What happens when you make a mistake? In cross-stitch, a mistake usually means you miscounted. If you catch it early, you can unpick the stitches, but it's tedious. If you don't catch it until much later, it can throw off an entire section of the design, forcing a major rework or a creative fudge. Because everything is on a grid, one misplaced stitch has a domino effect. Embroidery is generally more forgiving. If a stitch doesn't look right, you can often just pull it out and try again without affecting the surrounding stitches. Since it's not grid-based, you can also make creative decisions on the fly, adding a leaf here, changing the curve of a stem there, without having to redraft a formal pattern. Applications. Both crafts produce beautiful results, but they tend to be used for different things. Cross-stitch, with its structured, durable nature, is perfect for items that will be handled or viewed as a whole piece: framed art, samplers, Christmas ornaments, bookmarks, and decorative pillows. The pixelated aesthetic also lends itself well to pop culture and retro video game patterns. Embroidery's versatility makes it a natural fit for embellishment. It's used to add personality to clothing, create monograms on linens, add intricate floral details to home decor, and create textured, three-dimensional art. If you want to customize a t-shirt or a pair of jeans, embroidery is your go-to. Texture and dimension. If you run your hand over a finished piece, you'll feel the difference immediately. A standard cross-stitch project is relatively flat. The texture comes from the crisscrossing threads, but the height is uniform. Dimension is typically added by incorporating backstitching for outlines or adding French knots for small dots, but the core is flat. Embroidery, however, is all about creating texture and dimension. You can use a padded satin stitch to make parts of the design physically raised off the fabric. You can create loopy, chunky textures with a bullion knot or a woven effect with a spiderweb stitch. Techniques like stump work even create three-dimensional elements that rise dramatically from the surface. It's a much more sculptural medium. Machine compatibility. In the modern era, both crafts can be replicated by machine. An embroidery machine can be programmed to create cross-stitch patterns, laying down tiny X's in a grid just like you would by hand. It's a great way to get the cross-stitch look on a larger scale or for commercial production. However, machine embroidery truly shines when replicating the freeform styles of hand embroidery. Machines can lay down satin stitches, fill stitches, and running stitches with incredible speed and precision, making them ideal for creating company logos on polo shirts or intricate designs on a mass scale. The key difference is that a machine is executing a digital file, while the heart of the handcrafts lies in the personal touch and slight imperfections that make each piece unique.